So, updates on everything that's been going on with the DeRito Act. Stay tuned. One, I want to give a shout out to Megan Clement. She went today and testified in front of Senator Blumenfeld in Connecticut about Operation Fouled Anchor and the sexual assault cases going on in the Coast Guard, at the Coast Guard Academy, and everything in between. And she is an amazing person. Let me explain. She is the only person to come on the podcast and actually do exactly what she said she was going to do. I'm going to make reform. I'm going to make noise. I'm going to go to senators and congressmen. And these are the advocates that we need. If you don't do anything and you sit there and run your mouth and you remain anonymous, you know what's going to change? Nothing. If you don't put yourself out there and put yourself at risk and say the names that need to be said, you know what's going to happen? Nothing. Megan went out there, said them all by name, called everybody out in their chain of command. And then after that, she supported the DeRito Act. And the DeRito Act, yes, I know it's named after me, but it's going to help end sexual assault, retaliation for reporting misconduct, and everything else, so you can actually adjudicate these cases and hold officers, cadets, senior NCOs, general officers accountable in a court of law, and not just by the UCMJ. I cannot stress enough how important that is, and that's why we're getting fought so much. So please, watch her testimony. Unbelievable bravery. And I am so proud of her. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Clement?
Good morning, Senator Blumenthal and ranking committee members. I'm really grateful to be here today. My name is Megan Clement, and I served in the Coast Guard from 2012 to 2015. I'm a military sexual trauma survivor, and I stand here as an advocate for my younger version of myself and every enlisted member who needs to be heard. Have you ever had a nightmare where you're in a crowd of people and someone is after you but you can't scream or run? That is what it felt like for me serving in the Coast Guard after my assaults. I was a 19-year-old girl who never left home before I joined. My first unit was an isolated small boat station that robbed me of all the confidence I left boot camp with. By the time I arrived at Air Station Port Angeles, I wanted to be seen as a good worker. I met the man who would continue to assault me and harass me over the course of the next 4 months, my second day there, also days after I married my husband. He was more than twice my age and a retired senior chief contracted to the base. He was a very well-liked man by the command, and I'm grateful for MK2 Cool, who recognized what this man was doing, and he went forward and reported it in hopes our leadership would do the right thing. My cries and pleas to be seen and heard did not fall upon deaf ears, but weak leaders who failed me on every level. My assaults became a stain on their careers, but what they fail to see is their response is the stain. From my first class who didn't advocate for me, my chief warrant officer who tried to intimidate me, they were weak. My command master chief and my executive officer who told me to keep my mouth shut in fear it would ruin my reputation and follow me around, when in reality, they were worried about themselves because they are weak. My CJIS agents who re-victimized me by making me touch myself, they were weak. The D13 Master Chief who told his colleagues I was only upset over an unwanted hug, discrediting my months of assaults, and then telling me I wasn't actually assaulted, he was weak too. And in true Coast Guard fashion, what did they do? They made him the Master Chief Petty Officer of the entire Coast Guard. What happens under weak leaders? Failure. The Coast Guard failed people before me, and they've continued to fail people after me. The teachings of the Academy have poisoned the entire fleet. It is extremely naive to believe that this is a problem of the past. The officers who were cadets during Operation Fouled Anchor are now our leaders. When I got asked to film my assault story for the Storytellers Project, I was hopeful that that meant that the Coast Guard had made strides to be better, that there had been progress made since I had been discharged in 2015. It was devastating to find out that the Coast Guard had still thought it was a good idea to silence our stories. But I knew that I was called back for a purpose, and that purpose was to continue to fight for the ones who don't have a voice. I released my video on my own accord, and since, over 50 survivors have reached out to me. Some prior enlisted, some active duty. I have spent countless hours helping and advocating for them. I have received messages that say, I need help. I am desperate. I have no one to turn to. I knew that I needed to continue to fight for change because so many of these active duty members are in the same situation I was in a decade ago, left in the desert watching the last plane take off. I will not let the Coast Guard tell the public that this is a thing of the past when so many of your members are fighting for justice and accountability right now. If I hadn't released my video and inquired about my documents, I would have never known that I never received a 6095, something I would need for VA benefits. I wouldn't have been contacted by multiple women who had been assaulted by my same perpetrator. I wouldn't have learned that I, in fact, was not the first person to report him to my command. The command repeatedly allowed his behavior to slide and, in turn, left me to get assaulted by him. I want to see this through. I want to feel the pride for the Coast Guard again. I want to see them be better. My sons are so proud of their mother for serving her country, but what they do not understand yet is that their mother's service was spent surviving and fighting for accountability. When I was 20 years old and still in the Coast Guard, I got pregnant with my son. And when I was pregnant, I was still wearing a label as a bad worker, as a liar, and someone who made a fuss over an unwanted hug. I was under so much stress wearing a label I did not deserve. And it was within my 7th month of pregnancy that I found out I had internal damage. I had to return to work, and absolutely no one knew the news I had found out. All the pain I felt physically was my body's reaction to my assaults, to not feeling safe. I gave birth to my son, and I wept when I had to return to work, knowing that I was going to have to return to an unsafe work environment. I remember holding my son in my arms that morning, and I decided that I would continue to advocate and stand up, and I would become someone he was proud of. To everyone in a leadership position, I guarantee you that none of the leaders who failed me thought I would be standing here today. I wasn't quiet then, and I won't be quiet now. So the next time you try to silence a survivor, remember me, that they could be exposing what you did a decade later. Make decisions that you will be proud of 10 years from now. Make the right choice and advocate for the ones who need it. The Coast Guard is filled with phenomenal people, some of whom I consider family, and I wouldn't be here today if MK2 Cool hadn't recognized what happened to me, or Chief Prysock, who taught me how to protect myself, the chiefs who stood up for me in the mess, and the captain who fought for me. This is how I honor these great people fighting for what is right. What has happened to me has happened to so many others. I am not unique. I am not special. I am one of many. I will continue to stand up for these members, and I will continue to help find ways to make the Coast Guard a safer place. And I highly recommend that you look into the DeRito Act, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clement.